Hi, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed watching the Brain Pop video about genres. And I'm so sorry that I'm not with you today on Zoom to share all these great tips about genres and finding which genre is your favorite. So let's go over first some nonfiction genres. Can you think of a few before I reveal them? So in nonfiction, we have biography, which is the true story about a real person's life written by another person. So Kate DiCamillo did not write this book about herself. Another author wrote it about her life. Same with Benjamin Franklin. Informational, so books that teach you about a topic. So it could be about animals or history. It could be a book about the weather. So informational books. And finally, we also have autobiography. This is a book about a person written by the person it's about. So author and illustrator Bill Peet wrote a book about his own life. That's an autobiography. Another genre is poetry. So poetry is verse written to create a response of thought and feeling from the reader. It often uses rhythm and rhyme. You should all be familiar with poets like Shel Silverstein and Jack Prelutsky. So how many genres can you think of? Hopefully you have a few in mind from the Brain Pop video, but I created a little video to show you some of the genres that we'll be focusing on and some books in each genre. Okay, so those are some of the genres we're going to talk about next. So one of my favorite genres is fantasy. I love Harry Potter, and that falls into this genre. So in our library, our fantasy books have a label on it that looks like this. There's a city floating in the clouds. Some of the books in that genre, we have The Silver Chair in the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Charlie Bone series, of course, and Harry Potter. So fantasy is, let's reveal our answer. It's a type of story that includes elements that are impossible, such as talking animals, magic powers. They often have a setting in a medieval universe, and characters might include wizards, fairies, genies, dragons, and elves. This is a type of story that could not happen in real life. On the other hand, a type of story that can happen in real life is realistic fiction. It's a type of story that could happen. It's set in the real world during modern times. The characters seem believable. The readers believe that the story could really happen. So in this genre, we have sports stories, we have school stories, friendship stories. Our next genre is mystery. Oh, I love mysteries. This is my other favorite genre. Are you thinking about what your favorites are? A mystery is a suspenseful story about a puzzling event that is not solved until the end of the story. Strange events keep happening. It's centered around a detective or a person that is investigating a crime. Sometimes the main character is a kid. Sometimes the main character is an animal or a grown-up. Encyclopedia Brown is a really fun mystery series where you have to guess the answer to the mystery, and it does tell you the answer at the end of the book. I also love the A to Z mysteries. I love Nancy Drew. Hardy Boys is another example of a mystery. Historical fiction is a type of story that takes place in a particular time period in the past. Often the setting's real, but the characters are made up. Famous people in the past might be in the story. This genre blends history with fiction. So an example of a real character, so if we look at this book here in the My Name is America series, the Revolutionary War patriot. So in this story, we might have George Washington as a character, even though he was a real person. It's a real time period from the past, a real place, but the character's made up. Number the Stars, this is a story that takes place during World War II. Science fiction. This kind of falls under the fantasy umbrella because it's something that couldn't happen in real life yet. It's a type of fantasy that uses science and technology of the future. It has a setting in the future, in outer space, on other worlds, or involving aliens. It involves this discovery of new scientific ideas, such as time travel or robots. So if it's a book that takes place in the future, there's time travel, aliens, then you know it falls in that science fiction genre. Sometimes it's also called sci-fi. Star Wars is a great example of sci-fi. Horror. How many of you like the spooky stories? I don't like to read scary stories. This is a type of story that's purpose is to frighten the reader. It can be supernatural or non-supernatural, meaning it could have ghosts and vampires and werewolves in it, or it could just be a spooky story that seems like it could happen. A lot of times a horror story is suspenseful. So here are some examples. Did you know this was a book before a movie, The House with a Clock in Its Walls? And any story about haunted houses. A great example of horror would be the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine. And the last genre we'll talk about today is adventure. I think a lot of you have read adventures. An example of an adventure is Hatchet and Julie of the Wolves, but I bet you would all think of the I Survived series. I Survived is a blend of adventure and historical fiction. So yes, some books can fall in more than one genre. So an adventure is a survival story with exciting plots. Many times the setting is in the wild. The main character must make decisions that will determine if he or she will survive. So these are also a little bit suspenseful. And some kids think of this as it could really happen. Why isn't it realistic fiction? Because yes, it could happen, but the main themes of the story are the survival elements. A book that was at the book fair last year, you might remember, is called Wildfire. That's a great example of adventure. We don't know if the main character will survive. And that's also the newest I Survive book that we just got in the library. So I hope this was helpful in you determining what genres you like to read and understanding a little bit more about genres. Let me pause here, and I'll tell you a little bit about the next part of your lesson.